You can often tell without asking. They stay calm when plans fall apart. They don't panic when technology fails. They're comfortable with silence, patience, and figuring things out on their own. And when life becomes uncertain, their reaction isn't shock, it's adjustment. If you grew up in the 1980s or were raised by someone who did, this mindset isn't accidental. That decade shaped a particular psychological framework, one influenced by independence, limited stimulation, clear boundaries, and constant adaptation. This is the psychology of people who grew up in the 1980s, and why their way of thinking often feels noticeably different today. One of the most defining influences of the 1980s was early independence. Childhood during this period involved far less supervision than today. There were no tracking apps, no instant communication, and no expectation of constant availability. Children were often trusted to manage their time, explore freely, and return home by a set boundary, usually when daylight faded. Psychologically, this environment encouraged self-reliance. Problem-solving developed internally rather than through immediate external support. Mistakes were part of learning, not emergencies requiring instant correction. As adults, many people from this generation demonstrate strong internal confidence. They tend to attempt solutions before seeking assistance and are comfortable making decisions without constant reassurance. This isn't avoidance, it's a learned belief in personal capability. If this resonates, you may notice that you instinctively try to handle challenges quietly before involving others. Another key influence was the relationship with boredom. In the 1980s, boredom was a normal state. Entertainment was limited, schedules were less crowded, and stimulation wasn't continuously available. When there was nothing to do, children had to create engagement on their own. From a psychological standpoint, this strengthened imagination, attention span, and emotional regulation. The brain learned to tolerate stillness and unstructured time without distress. In adulthood, this often translates into comfort with quiet moments and the ability to focus without constant stimulation. However, it can also make modern environments, filled with notifications, rapid content, and sensory overload, feel mentally exhausting. If you find peace in simplicity or feel drained by constant digital input, this early conditioning may be part of the reason. Growing up in the 1980s also involved clear exposure to authority and structure. Social roles were well defined. Parents, teachers, and institutions held visible authority, and expectations were often explicit. Rules were not always debated, but understood and followed. Psychologically, this cultivated an awareness of systems and boundaries. Many people from this era instinctively understand organizational structures and social hierarchies. They know when to follow rules, when to challenge them, and when to disengage. At the same time, this upbringing produced different outcomes. Some individuals internalized responsibility and discipline early. Others complied outwardly while developing independent thinking later in life. If you recognize this pattern, you may respect structure while still maintaining personal judgment about authority. Emotional expression during the 1980s followed a different standard than today. Feelings were rarely discussed openly. Emotional resilience was valued more than emotional articulation. Stress was handled privately, and vulnerability was often minimized. Psychologically, this encouraged emotional containment. Many individuals learn to process feelings internally rather than through verbal expression. Strength was associated with endurance rather than disclosure. In adulthood, this often appears as emotional steadiness under pressure. These individuals may remain calm during crises and dependable in difficult situations. However, they may struggle to articulate emotional needs or ask for support. If this sounds familiar, you may be someone others rely on, while rarely expressing your own emotional strain. A defining feature of this generation is its position between two worlds. People who grew up in the 1980s experienced life before the digital age and adapted as technology transformed society. They learned patience before speed, depth before convenience, and privacy before constant exposure. Psychologically, this created cognitive flexibility. They can function comfortably without technology while also using modern tools effectively. They understand the benefits of digital life without fully depending on it. This often results in a balanced skepticism. Technology is useful, but not central to identity. Speed is helpful, but not always preferred. Convenience is appreciated, but not at the cost of depth. If you feel neither fully nostalgic nor fully immersed in modern trends, this bridging experience may explain why. Uncertainty was also a consistent background influence. The 1980s were shaped by economic shifts, political tension, and changing social structures. Stability existed, but change was expected. Psychologically, this normalized adaptation. Many individuals learned early that circumstances evolve and that flexibility is necessary. Life required adjustment rather than constant reassurance. As adults, this often appears as resilience. People from this era tend to tolerate uncertainty well and adapt when systems fail or plans change. However, this resilience can come with fatigue, a sense that constant adjustment has always been required. If you relate to this, you may be capable under pressure, but quietly exhausted by ongoing change. Finally, there is a grounded relationship with nostalgia. People who grew up in the 1980s often remember freedom, connection, and simplicity, but without idealizing the past completely. They recognize both its strengths and its limitations. Psychologically, this creates balanced perspective. There is appreciation for authenticity and substance rather than performance or trend-driven identity, meaning matters more than novelty. This mindset often leads to skepticism towards superficial change and a preference for what endures. If this resonates, you may find yourself less impressed by what is new and more interested in what lasts. The key insight is this. Growing up in the 1980s did not create a single personality type. It shaped a set of psychological adaptations suited to a specific environment, one that valued independence, tolerated boredom, limited emotional language, respected structure, and demanded adaptability. These individuals are not outdated. They are layered. They learned how to function without constant input and later adapted to a rapidly accelerating world. So take a moment to reflect. Which of these patterns feel familiar? Self-reliance, comfort with quiet, emotional restraint, adaptability, grounded realism. Perhaps it is not one trait, but the combination that feels recognizable. And if you grew up in a different era, this perspective may help explain the behavior of someone close to you, their calm, their silence, or their resistance to constant stimulation. If you find value in exploring how environment and time shape the human mind, this is a conversation worth continuing. So consider this final thought. How much of who you are today was quietly shaped by the decade you grew up in? Let that stay with you.